Welcome back into another episode of George in the Jungle, presented as always by Remington Tavern. Remington Tavern can be found at 8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have their daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. You can check them out on Instagram at RemyTav Cincy. That's REMITAV Cincy with a Y, or follow them on Facebook. And with that, George, you brought another friend this week for us.
Little Reds talk. My man, Mark Sheldon, we've known each other for, gosh, I hate to say it's probably close to 30 years now, right?
I started at Channel 5 as an intern in 1994. So
my God, it's 30 years.
And then we go past, then I came back and worked there for a couple of years. And then I came back again to work there on the website for a little over a year plus. So, yeah, I've had 3 tours at Channel 5.
That's crazy. And we talked to Jeff Hobson about this last week, and that was like when this whole internet thing started. And you were kind of in on the front end of that too. And we didn't know what it was going to be. And I guess we should have expected, and some people did say this is going to be where everything's at.
Yeah.
We're there. It's crazy.
It's crazy where everyone can produce their own shows, and you don't need a giant studio, and you don't need a whole lot of stuff. You just need a laptop and a dream, I guess, right? So it's pretty good.
It saved us during the COVID year when the Reds were playing. I know that.
Yeah.
Imagine if we hadn't had technology. Well, first things first, and you're down at spring training and have been covering the Reds and for Reds.com and MLB. And I talked to you, or we texted. I can't remember. We may have talked, and you said, man, it's too bad you're not down here this year because it's a totally different kind of vibe. And dealing with the players even, it's a different deal.
It is. Terry Francona, certainly hard to say how many wins a manager could be worth, and I'm not going to even try, but you got to think it'll be a few. But what I have noticed is that from the first day, everything they've done here has had a purpose, and that purpose is towards winning. It has not been a wasted time. There has not been long meetings and lots of theory and talking, and it's just been all about winning. And I know that their record, obviously, in spring training, they just snapped a 6 or 7 game losing streak today. But the purposes of this is to get ready for the season, and then they've done that pretty well. And I feel like these guys would go through a wall for Tito if he asked them to. They seem pretty fired up. They really do want to play for him. And the people that need to be playing well seemingly have been playing well for the most part. Not everybody, but it's definitely been a different type of camp than I experienced the last couple of years.
And when I saw him on with his interview with Jim Day during that game, and he made his come here and kick somebody's ass every day comment about wanting to build that kind of a culture. Did any of the players react to that, or did they know about it and hear about it? Because that would fire me up.
I don't know if they heard about that, but I know that he has said that in various ways. Basically, he wants to win, and he didn't come out of retirement to sit around and be a 500 team or be a losing team. He wants to win. And if you're not on board, you're not going to last with the Reds very long. I think some guys that were here last year have already been sent out. When I think about Will Benson, and it wasn't because he didn't want to win. It's just he's a hard worker and everything like that, but he just wasn't getting it done. And he was allowed to be up all last season, and he didn't even make the final cut this year. So, and Noelvi Marte is another example. If you're not earning it, you're not staying. And I think that's important to send that message. And they may need to keep sending that message throughout the year. It's going to take a while for all of what he's doing to take hold, but it's been a very intentional camp. The drills have been very well run, and you do see some of it show up in the games. Maybe they don't always show up in the wins, but things like the relays they work on and things like that, I've seen it put into action in the games, and it's worked.
Tell me if I'm wrong about this, because my next question when you brought up Benson was going to be Marte and what kind of message that sent. Because to me, last year, when that dude came back from suspension, he got off way too easy with this organization as far as bringing him up, playing him, when Espinal is having a pretty good year and was not getting the at-bats. They eventually fixed that, but it was far too late. Did that send a message?
I think, yeah. I mean, Benson less so, but definitely Marte, because they don't exactly have a proven third baseman yet. And I guess the simple way would be to let him have the job, but they weren't going to do that. Tito said from the very beginning he would have to earn it, and you kind of felt the vibes that he wasn't going to probably be on the inside track for that, even just with the way he was playing the later innings with the prospects and things like that. He just didn't seem like he was in a position to win this job. And I think it was important to show that wasn't going to be handed to him because he was once a prospect, a high prospect, but he was just thoroughly unprepared last season. He was suspended, which is a big letdown for the team. And then when he came in, he just wasn't hitting. He didn't perform, and his defense took a dump. And I think you put all those three together, and he definitely has to come back and reestablish himself. And the only way he can do that is to get regular at-bats, and the only place he can do that right now is in AAA. So I did think it sent a message because they're going to go with probably Gavin Lux at third base and a little bit of Espinal and maybe some Candelario. But Marte is going to have to earn it, and it's not just going to be for a week. He's going to have to earn it for a little while.
That's great to see in my book. We're getting down to the nitty gritty. I can't believe a week from Thursday is opening day. Final roster spots. What are we looking at? Because there's a little bit of a crowd in the bullpen. I think it's coming into focus. And then, the extra outfielders. And, you've got, I think, Fairchild's out of options, right? Does that give him an inside track? And then where do you see this shaking down with the pitching and the bench and, the starting rotation because of what Abbott did last night?
Yeah, there's a few spots for Fairchild. I think he's probably going to make it, but I also think he would clear waivers if they did try to send him down. I don't know if there's a huge market for him, but it's going to be down to like Fairchild and Blake Dunn and Jacob Hurtubise, and those final bench spots / outfield. One of the huge question marks is Spencer Steer. Right now, it looks like it's iffy that he could be ready in time for the season. He hasn't had an at-bat since February 27th. He's going to start getting some at-bats on Thursday in a minor league game. He resumed throwing today. But Tito's holding out every hope. He does not want to put him on the IL if he doesn't have to, because he really respects the way Steer goes about it. He's even helping like with cutoffs. He'll just shag flies and retrieve all the balls. He's thrilled to watch Steer try to participate, even though he's limited. And I think he wants to give him a shot. So if he makes it, that does take away a spot for someone else. Over at on the rotation, the fifth spot, Abbott's probably going to get it. But if anything goes wrong, if there's a rain out on the day he starts, if he's not feeling well, that could change it. And that makes a spot open for either Carson Spires or Graham Ashcraft. Spires has been very good this spring, and I would think, deserve the spot over Ashcraft based on the performances so far. Bullpen, there's 7 spots decided. Now you're looking at the 8th spot. It could be Spires, Ashcraft, Ian Jabot. It could be this Joe LaSorsa is a lefty. It'd be unlikely to take 4 lefties, but if one of the other lefties isn't ready for whatever reason, LaSorsa could move in there. Tony Santion probably has a spot locked up. It almost certainly does. And then there's also Lyon Richardson also in the mix. He had a good day today too. So there's not too much to think about in terms of spots. They're all pretty much sorted out.
You bring up the Spencer.
Oh, go ahead, Aaron.
You bring up the Spencer Steer injury, and I've been extremely critical of this medical staff and the way that they've handled injuries, not just this season with the way I feel like the way that the Spencer Steer thing has gone, because you're this far into the preseason. It doesn't seem like there was a ton of plan, at least publicly. Last year, you had what happened with CES and what became, I guess, quasi-public as far as the mishandling of a broken thumb in his hand. I'm very confused as to what's going on with this medical staff. Is that a fair criticism? Is it something that seems just out of sorts?
I don't think it's necessarily fair or unfair. I think it's hard to explain, but with Steer,
Matt McLean too.
Well, McLean, he had shoulder. I mean, nothing happened really with him. The mistake they made with McLean was coming out of his oblique injury. He shouldn't have been swinging as many times as he was, and I feel like that's more of a coaching oversight than it was a medical oversight. He should not have been allowed to swing this bat and re-aggravate his oblique, and that has nothing to do with what his shoulder did when he hurt his shoulder. And I felt like that was pretty straightforward. The Steer thing is this. There's no structural damage. He's had MRIs. There's no injury in terms of a tear. There's no rotator cuff fraying. There's no anything, no bursts or sacks, any of that stuff that goes on in his shoulder that would warrant a major procedure. And, I see on the social media, well, why doesn't he just get a surgery and get it over with? Well, the last thing you want to do in baseball is cut your shoulder. And
Sure.
That's a ruiner. Ask Joey Votto, and he had his shoulder cut and it wasn't even his throwing shoulder. And for Steer, getting a shoulder surgery would put him out not only for this year, but he's probably not going to be ready in time for next year. So you got to be really, really deliberate before you make those kind of decisions. So I don't think that was a problem. Last year, David Bell had told us that he wasn't really good for third base because of his shoulder, but he could still play left field, different type of throwing. He could still play first base, and he could still hit without pain. And that's all true. Steer said he got into some bad habits because he did make some adjustments to accommodate his shoulder, and that's probably why his numbers weren't as strong as he wanted. But I don't necessarily think anyone's mishandled it, but I think he was trying to play through it. And I guess in a way you can't have it both ways. You want these guys to play and not sit in the training room all the time. And then when they get hurt, they get criticized for getting hurt. So I'm not really sure what the best way for them to go forward was.
Well, thank you.
That's a long explanation. I'm sorry. I mean,
I'm good with it.
Actually, as long as I've been around, you clearly explained the situation with these guys, with the shoulders and how delicate that can be. And that is a big decision. And, if you have these, and Lord knows I've seen enough MRIs on myself and everything else, and the stuff like me, even being a layman, when the doctor shows me, and this is this, that's that, it's like, oh yeah. And then they have all these little sections of every angle, a 3D picture basically of what they're dealing with. And if that's not showing something that needs that kind of treatment, it would be malpractice to go in there if there wasn't something showing. So I'm glad you kind of cleared that up for me. Backing up a little bit to Abbott. So he threw last night, and he had a similar situation. I don't know what's going on with the shoulder and all that there, but he does still have time. He can make maybe two more starts or another start and throw, and then maybe fill in that.
Yeah, he threw last night, which was Monday. He would, it's not out yet what the probables are, but he's lined up that he could throw again on Saturday and go 4 innings and about 70 pitches, 65 pitches. And then theoretically that would build him up that if he could either throw a simulated game back in Cincinnati somewhere, either at the ballpark or whatever, it could get to the 5th inning and 75 pitches, and that would have him set up for his turn in the rotation. They may or may not need a 5th guy the first time through. They have an off day on the 28th, but after that they play 12 games in a row, so they will need a starter. They won't. He'll have to be him, because if otherwise you put him on the injured list, he won't be available for 15 days. So they have to kind of weigh that as well. But I think based on his track record and the way he looks, he should be ready to go, because I think they'll take 5 innings, and certainly if Spires makes the team or someone like a guy like Suter who can go multiple innings, he has some backup in case he has a short outing.
The Reds seem to be okay with the platoon situation, regardless whether it's David Bell or now Terry Francona here. You have platoon situations in both your corner outfield spots, as the Reds have not made a move. They've not made a trade. They've not made a signing outside of the Austin Hayes signing, and we'll see where he ends up slotting. And then at third base, you have, I guess, a dearth of players that could potentially play third, but nobody seems like an everyday guy. Is this something that we should be concerned about? Something we should be looking for a move at some point early in the season as opposed to the trade deadline? Or is this something that you think they're going to stay status quo and just continue to run platoons?
Well, I don't think it's a straight platoon in either spot per se, but there will be some mixing and matching at times. I think Hayes at the moment has shown he can play every day in camp. His track record does not say that. I know his numbers, his splits maybe are different, but I feel like they seem like they're pretty comfortable having him in the cleanup spot in left field, and that's where he's played pretty much throughout camp. Whether he sits for a tough right-hander and they use one of the lefty bats, that's certainly possible. Over at third base, it seems like they're going to do some sort of situation with Lux maybe being the guy, but they're also going to find ways to kind of use Candelario there. Espinal will get some chances there, but if Lux doesn't play, let's say third base in a game, he might go to left field. There are ways to work that, but Tito was pretty careful to say he didn't view it as a platoon because it's not going to be like a lefty righty thing. It could be just what's the best way to get the most out of the lineup on a given day against a certain pitcher. And I know it sounds like a platoon, it looks like a platoon, but it's not like the normal type of platoon where it's one guy against lefties and one guy against righties. It's going to be a little bit more nuanced than that.
More gut than analytics.
No, I mean, it'll be analytics. I mean, you have to look at somebody's track record. If somebody stinks against whatever pitcher, you're not going to run them out there unless you have to. You look at the numbers, and if the guy's got a good, let's say even if he's a left-handed hitter and he's got a good numbers against that lefty pitcher, he's probably going to play.
I like that. That's how it should be, right?
Yeah.
Gavin Lux, you mentioned him. You mentioned him at third. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I read where he had some of those throwing issues, and they were kind of concerned, not the Reds concerned, but the Dodgers when they had him. How's he looked, and how's it going defensively for him down there?
Yeah, it's certainly a question mark because he's only played one major league game at third and 5 minor league games. So it's certainly a reason to be concerned. I would say that he is an average third baseman right now. I wouldn't say he's a star, and I wouldn't say he's a defensive wonder kind. He's not Nolan Arenado, but he's been very adequate. He's been satisfactory is the best way I can put it. He's made the throws that I've seen him make. In LA last year, he was poised to be the starting shortstop, and for the lack of the better term, they kind of said he got the yips throwing to first, and he was having trouble making those throws. And I asked him about it early in camp, and he said, well, he was coming off missing all of 2023 with knee surgery, and he just didn't feel like he had confidence in his legs yet, and he was having trouble making those throws. But he feels like he worked on it enough in the offseason. He was prepped to prepare to play for third base. So he said he spent a lot of time there working in the winter to get ready. He feels comfortable, and so far he has not done anything that I've seen wrong at third base. He hasn't had a ton of chances, but he's done okay. And I think let's put it this way. I think he's better than Candelario, who still doesn't look all that great to me at third base. And he's the other option. And that guy's been a third baseman for a lot longer. So I would say that their best defensive situation right now, save for Espinal, would be to have Lux at third. I mean, Espinal has been a great defensive player anywhere he goes.
Yeah.
But they want Lux's bat. And right now, putting him at third base is the best place for his bat. And he's played okay on defense. And I think that's all they need. They have 2 exceptional defenders up the middle in De La Cruz and McLean. First base, Encarnacion Strand is going to be okay. He's another one that's not really gifted defensively, but he's made some improvements and he's been working on it. But they really do need to be stronger up the middle, and they are.
I do think when you say up the middle, though, am I crazy? I like TJ Friedel in center field.
He's also good up the middle. He's a good center fielder. He'll have his legs theoretically back this year. You know, he had an injury. I think it was his hamstring, and he wasn't really much of a runner the whole second half. He didn't have any of the wheels that he normally has, so he's looked good as well. But right now, if you look at the middle spots, you have due to the injury to Stevenson, you have a very good catcher in Jose Trevino. You have 2 good middle infielders in De La Cruz and McLean, and you have a very good center fielder with Friedel, and that's a good place to start as they really need to improve their defense this year from past years.
Alexis Diaz has been a little bit of a question mark through spring training. At what point do we need to press the panic button on Alexis Diaz?
Truthfully, I think it's there. I just haven't seen a guy that's very ready for the season, and I do wonder what is going to happen. I think if we talked about earlier about messages, if you want to send a message to this team that if you're not ready, you're not going to be here.
Man,
Alexis Diaz is the closer at Louisville this year to start. I just think he's a guy that needs to get it together, and you know, Francona kind of made it pretty clear the other day because he had that disastrous 5-run outing on Saturday with Kansas City, and he had a cut on his thumb, like his fingernail scraped his thumb, and he was bleeding. And I asked, was that anything to do with it? And Francona's like, that had nothing to do with it. He didn't give him the out, you know, which I think some managers might have done. And I thought that was great. And he says we need to get it locked in here. And I didn't see his performance, and I haven't heard the outcome. He did throw in a minor league game today, so I'll be curious to hear how that came out. But right now, they also signed, or they traded for Taylor Rogers, who has closing experience. They went out and signed Scott Barlow right at the beginning of camp. He has closing experience. Emilio Pagan has closing experience, and Tony Santillan certainly looks like a closer, and that could handle it. He hasn't done it, you know, very much. He did it a little bit in 2022, and it wasn't all that successful. But I think if he gets another run at it, I think he could possibly do it. So I think Diaz is going to be pushed, and if he does make the team and he does go into the season as the closer, he's going to have to prove himself, or he won't be the closer very long.
All right, you bring up something where I've got my ass pounded. Well, that doesn't sound good, but I mean, I've gotten killed for 30 years by baseball people. And I will talk to them about set closer, set role, etched in stone. That's how it's got to be with a closer, a setup man. I think you can mix and match. I think I do not have a problem with closer by committee. And going with not necessarily just a hot hand, but who's mowed down these hitters. Or if a guy has a really good eighth inning, throw him back out there. But these baseball guys have told me for 30 years I'm wrong on that. How wrong?
Well, I don't think you're wrong. I think it's as what I would say is there's a book. You know, they all buy the book. And if you're a manager and your closer fails, you can say, hey, I went by the book.
Right.
But I think nowadays, especially this is an area where I think it's evolving, is that you want your best reliever to be on the mound in your toughest situation. And if your so-called closer there's a bases loaded in the seventh inning and the 4, 5, and 6 hitters are coming up in the lineup, do you want your seventh guy in the bullpen out there, or do you want your best guy? And I would make the argument you get your best guy up and you get through that 7th inning, and then you figure out the 8th and the 9th. And I don't think, I mean, that's kind of how they do it a little bit in the playoffs. And I don't have a problem with that if you have the right people. That's the only thing, is if you don't have the right people, that's not always doable. Because I will say closing, I don't discount the term of the closer, because I've seen it where some guys are just lights out, kick ass in the 8th inning and are absolutely just all thumbs in the 9th. And I don't know why that is. It's kind of like the kicker, where a guy like McPherson's hitting everything he can in one season, and the next year he can't in anything. So it's like, you know, being a good basketball shooter, you lose your touch. I think closing is a very mental job, more so than the other ones and other roles in the bullpen. And I don't think you can discount that. However, I'd like to see more managers color outside the lines a little bit and use their closer in different situations.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's always been my argument, is like sometimes the game's on the line in the 7th, 8th inning, and you're leaving your liveliest or best arm in the bullpen until there's, you know, nobody on and nobody out. And it's like, that's not the high pressure situation that you had in the 7th or the 8th. But however, again, there is plenty of evidence, and I've seen it. I've seen guys on the Reds who were good relief pitchers, and then they get named the closer, and they go out there and just absolutely obliterate the bed, if you know what I mean. And I don't get it. I don't get it, but that pressure, there is something. And I guess that's where the trust factor comes in for these managers, to trust a guy in that situation. And if you don't have the stones and the mental attitude to do it, some guys don't handle it well. So I guess there's somewhere in there, Mark, is a happy medium in my book. And I like you, I would like to see them do that a little more outside the lines than by the book.
David Bell tried that a bit last year at times, but I think if you saw that some of the times he brought in Diaz in earlier than the ninth, it wasn't always successul.
No, it was weird.
And that's the problem. You have to have the right people for this, and you have to have a guy that's willing to do it. I mean, if you took a guy like Lucas Sims or from last year or Brent Suter, they'll take the ball at any time. You give them the ball in the fourth inning, if their bases are loaded, they'll be fired up for that.
Suter's ridiculous. I mean,
yeah.
I'm waiting for him to just turn around and throw right-handed one of these games because he's pretty much done everything else out there.
Yeah, and I think this year they have more veterans in the bullpen than they've had in the past. With Barlow, with Rogers, with Pagan, with Suter, possibly Jabot if he makes the team. And there's going to be a lot more guys, and I think you'll see a lot more repeatability. I think that's a big one this year, is having more guys available. I think in the past, somebody would throw 1 or 2 days and then be down for a while. And I think they want to see, like a guy like Barlow or even Brian Shaw, who got sent down. He wasn't afraid to go 6 out of 7 days. And that's throwing 81 games a season. That's a lot, but that's what they, relievers should be trained to do. And I think the Reds need to get back to that too, because they need these guys to be available. They need the starters to get past the 5th inning, and they need these relievers to be repeatable.
There's a lot of youth in this system. You got guys like Rhett Lauder. You got guys hitting 102, like May did the other night. I think that's how you say his name. Maxwell's fun to watch with his thumbs up, thumbs down. Cam Collier, Sal Stewart. You got just a Arroyo. There's a glutton almost of just youth right now in the system. At what point do you think we start to see some of these guys start to crack into the bigs this year?
I guess it depends on what the team's doing. Number one, if certainly you don't want to be going to a youth movement if you're trying to contend for a postseason berth. However, I think some of these guys could be helpful. The first one that comes to mind is the guy like Zach Maxwell, who's been in AAA. He's had some issues with his command and walks, but he was lights out at AA. He probably will obviously start at AAA this year. And I think if he gets together, he'd be a call. Luis May is around the corner. I think those are the first ones. The other guys you mentioned, like Stewart, AA, Cam Collier, when his thumb heals, AA. I guess there's a chance they could be up. Arroyo as well, AA. They'll eventually be up, but I don't know if it'll be this year. Rhett Lauder, certainly, once he gets his arm, gets his throwing down, they're not rushing him back, but I would imagine he'll definitely be up this year at some point. Chase Burns, depending if they follow the Rhett Lauder plan, right now they're kind of following the same blueprint to a T. And when Chase Burns is ready, maybe he's around at the end of the season because they really like his stuff. So, things are happening. I don't know if it's so much in 2025, but 2026, you're going to see a lot of these guys coming up.
On the flip side of that coin, Wade Miley finds himself in Louisville, and this pitching staff, as is currently composed, nobody's made it, I don't believe, through an entire season. So at what point do you think either Miley comes up to either be a 6th starter or just come in to start eating some innings for these guys?
Well, he's getting ready. He looked really, good today. He was fired up to throw live BP to 3 Reds hitters today, and he got through the session, do 20 pitches in less than 5 minutes. I mean, he just bam, bam, bam. That guy doesn't need a pitch clock.
Sounds all right.
It's amazing. And he's like, yeah, I'm ready to go today, but he knows that's not going to happen. And so, as Francona said today, they're going to have to sit on him, and they're going to have to make him go through the steps. He's not going to do maybe as much as a 22-year-old. Miley's 38, and if he were 22 or 24, maybe you take the full 18 months and do all the stuff. But he said, I don't want to wait that long. And he's like, if I get in there and I blow my arm out, then so be it. I've had a good career. But he's like, he's basically saying I'm on the express plan, and he's ready to go. He hasn't pitched in a year since April 16th. So, I mean, if he comes up in May, that'll be just over a year, and that's pretty impressive. And he'll just go. The only thing about Major League rotations is that something's going to happen where someone's going to get hurt, someone's not
Always
going to be
does.
available. Last year, you saw what happened to this rotation. Everyone thought it was deep enough, and it wasn't. And I think guys like having Miley in your pocket, having Rhett Lauder, having Graham Ashcraft, Carson Spires. If you're looking around the league, a lot of teams are doing this now, where they're not just settling on 5 starters. They got 6, 7, and 8 guys too, and either they're hiding them in AAA or they're in the bullpen, but they're around, and you're going to need them to get through a season. The 2012 year where the Reds had all 5 starters make every one of their starts is probably not going to happen again for quite some time, and that was quite a feat that year. And they went and won 97 games, so that kind of tells you how important that is.
Sure.
Yeah, we've made it this long into the show, and we did bring up McLean because of injury. But, okay, I see the numbers, and I've seen like a game and a half on television. But how good do McLean and Ellie look right now? Because I'm looking at the box scores and everything and reading your stuff. And, by the way, great article on Miley today with that stuff. I laughed all the way through it. But how do those two look? Because everyone loves them and thinks they're going to be the leaders of the franchise going forward, along with Hunter Green and a few others. But what's going on with them?
I think they look really good. Actually, today, De La Cruz, I think it was Santillan was pitching, and a comebacker went off Santillan's foot. I want to say it was Santillan. Could be. Anyway, comebacker off his foot, and it went to De La Cruz's right, and he had to lunge for it on a short hop, backhanded, and then he still turned from the hole and fired to first base and nailed the guy for the out. I mean, it was it says on the old box score, the old 163 put out, but it was much, that 6 was a big effort. Put a circle around it. He's looked good. I mean, he's hitting the ball hard. I think defensively he's looked okay. McLean, same thing. He's been healthy. He just, those two guys, but especially McLean. McLean is so fundamentally sound, and he just does everything well. He just, everything in his drills, everything he does, he just does not cut corners. He is so sound defensively. And I know a lot of people like Jonathan India, and they were mad that he got traded. And I liked India, and I certainly know he played as hard as he could. I wouldn't mind having a team with Jonathan India's all over it. But Matt McLean is a better second baseman defensively, and you're going to notice that upgrade this year. They were supposed to see it last year, but because of the injury, it didn't happen. I think you'll see this year what an upgrade it is to have McLean there every day.
And tell me I'm stupid for thinking Ellie could actually maybe be a better center field.
Listen, I understand the idea, and I've asked that question, and I've been told in so many words, they think he could be so special at shortstop and be I guess you would say, a transformative kind of player at shortstop, that no one else can do what he can do at shortstop, that they feel like that's worth having and exploiting. Certainly it makes a lot of sense to put him in center field. It'll certainly put less wear and tear on his body and enable him to hit better, because, being a shortstop as it is hard. And then you throw in all the stolen bases and all the head first slides that he makes. It does take a lot out of your body to hit. And then, of course, Edwin Arroyo, as we mentioned before, he's on his way. So at some point they may have to decide either to move Ellie to third or put him in center field or right field, because Arroyo is coming, and he's not playing any other positions really. He's playing shortstop at this moment, and he's a very, very good shortstop to boot. So yeah, I'll be curious what ends up happening.
Yeah, because I've heard a lot about how good he is defensively. And look, I will admit, Ellie makes some plays at short that you're just, wow. There is nobody else on the planet could do that. So that is special. And that does take a lot of chutzpah to move him to another position, even though I think in the long run it might make sense. So maybe when Arroyo is ready, how is he compared to Ellie at that position? Does he make those splash plays?
He does. I mean, he makes a lot of great plays, and I've seen him do some fun things in the hole. And just, he had a ball kind of come up on him. It was weird. It took a bad hop, and it came up on him, and he kind of snatched the ball out of the air and threw to first base. I wish I could explain it better than it actually happened. But it took a lot of dexterity and very, very just instinctual playing to make that play. And I don't know if anyone else could make that play, even if De La Cruz could make that play. And it was just impressive to watch him. I think they're both very good. De La Cruz certainly, just because he's 6'5" and he's got all that speed and he's got all that range. I mean, he's just a different. I can't compare them, but they both make their plays in their own way. And I mean, Arroyo's got a major league ready glove right now. It's just the rest of his game has to come up to major league standards in order to feel like you can go with him and bring him up.
All right. Well, we probably kept him long enough, didn't we?
That's okay.
Right.
Oh,
I enjoyed talking to you, George. It's always a pleasure to see you, and it's nice to meet you.
Yeah. The wife says hello.
Tell her to say hi.
Yeah, I will. Thanks. Okay, we can't hear her now. She's out there talking to her mom. That's a loud conversation, let me tell you. But I appreciate your time, Mark. And I don't want to, ask you how many wins this season. Who the hell knows? But I think it's going to be a better year than we had in 2024 for the Reds.
I think so. Let's put it this way. I feel like I don't know if they'll make the playoffs. It's not only is the Central, the Central is kind of a situation where it's pretty wide open for 3 or 4 teams. But if they don't win the Central, it's going to be hard to get that wild card just because of how deep the NL West and how deep the NL East is. There's a lot of teams, but I think the Reds will be in it. I'd be really, if they're not in it, I'd be really surprised. I thought they'd be in it last year, and they were grossly disappointing. But I think this year they have a chance to be there, and we'll see what they can come up with. I think it'll be a better pitching team. Certainly, Francona is going to be a big influence. It's just whether they have enough bats. I felt like their offense they didn't make a huge amount of improvements from last year to this year offensively. They didn't go out and sign on people. They're kind of counting on Matt McClain being back and Friedel being back, and then certainly Austin Hayes. And we'll have to see if that's enough.
Yeah, hopefully everybody stays healthy, because
that's a huge part of
it. If they do, because that killed them last year.
Yeah,
Mark, if you want a good laugh, text George about 3-4 weeks after the season started to ask who he put a bet in on MVP.
Yeah. Oh my God! Are you
okay?
Last year, after game 1, I put a Cy Young bet on Frankie Montas. I jinxed the hell out of him.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, Mark. Thank you very much. And don't
appreciate it.
Montas thing around.
I'll keep it to myself.
All right. Thank you, sir. Oh, my goodness.
Thank you.
Mark Sheldon from MLB.com, Reds.com does a great job. And I'm not lying. I read his stories, and I remember one time asking, I don't know, do you notice those hands at the end? Did you like this story? And you click on it, and it claps the hands. Do you know what I'm talking about on MLB or Reds.com?
Yeah.
If you click on their articles at the bottom. Yeah. Did you like? And I asked him one time, and this was early on when those hands first showed up, and I'm like, hey, I hit those hands today. Does that even matter? He goes, oh yeah, it does matter. I'm like, okay, I'll hit the hands every time. Whether I like your shit or not, I'm going to hit the hands.
You're a true friend, George. You're a true friend.
Absolutely. Anything for my buddies. But yes, always hit the hands. Go to Reds.com. Mark does a great job, and they always have that. It's always nice to go that injuries and latest moves things and click on that, and you're well informed. And as you can tell, I'm kind of a baseball nerd. Yeah,
well, I bought MLB The Show already, so I'm with you.
Oh God, you beat me to it because I got
the new one. Yeah, the new one. The early release came out on Friday. So,
what do you got on? A Bengals shirt?
Yeah, it's time to talk about
the
time to talk about the Bengals. They did. They finally did something. They made a move, big move.
I live up by the food park, and I was just before the show. I took a walk, and I was up there, and I saw the Brown family looking for aluminum cans. They had bags, and they're trying to pay these guys.
They should ask Huggins for some advice on that.
Apparently he's a good can hunter.
Big can collector, that guy.
In
any case,
what an absolute day for this franchise too.
Yeah.
I'm still hesitant. I'm telling you, I look, from a watching and a beauty standpoint, I love offense. I've always loved the passing game, and I appreciate good running. I love running backs too, but I grew up back in the old days. You had the AFL and the NFL, and the AFL was kind of the passing league. And back then, the passing league meant you passed 1 out of every 4 or 5 downs. But this is exciting. It's going to be exciting football either way, I hope. And I will say this, saying all that and having these hesitations, as I sit here right now, and maybe news is already out and it's gone the other way, but I think Trey Hendrickson comes back. I think they're going to do this. And I think what they did was a very smart negotiating ploy to let him go see what's out there. Now, of course, teams who are going to have to give up a first-round pick, or apparently the Bengals put too high of a price on it, but he's not going to get the cash that he's going to get here if a trade is made.
Look, I don't blame him for doing what they did as far as putting that high of a price tag on it, because if you let him play out the end of his contract this next season and he leaves and goes and plays for somebody else, he brings you back a 3rd-round pick. So if you're going to get a 3rd-round pick anyway for the guy, at the very least, you need to be asking for a 2nd-round pick. Otherwise, just let him play on the $16 million or whatever it is this season. It doesn't make sense. He's under contract. They're doing him an act of good faith, truthfully, and because they've done this before and it's bitten them. They've been snake bitten by this in the past. When you gave that extra contract to a Carlos Dunlap or a Geno Atkins. So I understand the hesitancy about it. And he tried to do this last offseason as well. Let's not forget that, where his agent apparently didn't know that you can't renegotiate 2 off seasons in a row. So here we are now you got an extension. You tried to get an extension last offseason, and now you're asking for an extension once again. Look, you were up in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. I don't think you were in enough conversations for Defensive Player of the Year, truthfully, but here we are. I don't blame them for going the route that they're going. I hope that it's no more. I hope that it's no more than a 2-year extension on top of this upcoming season. Truthfully, I don't want him signed past 33, because otherwise I think you run the risk of, again, finding yourself snake bitten by a defensive end who has aged out of a contract.
Yeah, and he's just, and for that position at an odd age to get anything long term right now, it's I don't think a lot of teams would do that, because other teams, it's not just the Bengals have been burned by doing that. Other teams have. But
the Bills
do I think they really, really, really do need him now after all this other stuff's done? And I'm not – when this started, I really thought the odd man out would be T. And I'm still not sure I'm wrong. I'm torn on this because there's other mouths to feed, and that's a lot. And I know your franchise quarterback put you on Front Street and said, you better get this done. And if it doesn't, but I got a feeling if they got the Chase thing done and the T thing kind of played out, he played on the tag this year and went away, I don't think Burrow would have been totally offended, even though he did put him on Front Street to get these guys signed. But looking at this Bengals roster, and Jeff Hobson told us last week he thinks the defensive backfield is fine, and the cornerback room is the strongest in the building. The safeties are fine. I'm not convinced. I'm not. I'm skeptical. However, if you have a pass rusher that kind of takes the heat off those guys a little bit, that does what Trey Hendrickson does, then you're probably a little stronger back there than what you would be without him.
Well, you also brought back a Cam Sample, you brought back a Joseph Osai, and you already were returning a Miles Murphy. So you have guys at that edge spot, clearly. You've got now 4 guys in that rotation. Could you still use another guy who's proven himself? Sure. I don't think you can ever have enough edge guys, truthfully, especially once injuries start to mount up and all of that. And if it's a guy that can fluctuate in between defensive tackle and edge, you kind of did yourself a favor there. So we'll see we'll see if they end up making another move there. I think that truthfully, the biggest upgrade that I've seen this out there. It's not an original take here, but you don't have Lou here, and Lou had a lot of allegiances to a lot of guys in that defensive back in the entirety of the defense. And without Lou here, you don't have a lot of the veterans that were here that you kind of found yourself into a situation where they weren't playing up to par. You had a Von Bell, you had a Sam Hubbard, you had just a Mike Hilton who he shined at times, but other times he got burned. He got burned bad. So I think that you
might be the best blitzing corner they've had in a while, though.
Without Golden here, he doesn't have those allegiances. You got better at the end of the season when you started playing some of the young guys, like a Battle, like Osai, like I don't Sample. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I think that you still need to add some pieces. You need to find a linebacker because I don't think you're nearly deep enough that I feel comfortable with at linebacker. If you make another signing for a defensive end, great. But you also have the draft coming up, and there's truthfully, if the next signing that they announce is not a guard of some sort, any sort, whether it be an actual signing of a free agent, because you still got some guys out there that are worthwhile, or a trade for a guard, then I don't want to hear it. You have to protect your quarterback who's going to be throwing the ball to these guys that are going to be here for the next 4 years.
Yeah, and that's where I start getting squirrely about this whole thing with all that money tied up and what's going to end up being 4 guys. And with the cap, and then how much are you going to be able to spend? Thank God they got BJ Hill done when they did. And I think that helps the defensive line immensely because he's got those other young tackles that he's working with. I mean, not only does he set a great example for them to follow and become a player like him, hopefully, he plugs a gap too, a huge gap in the middle of that line. And I thought that was big. I hope they have enough to fill all the holes, because here's my fear is that we're going to see the Bengals playing the Steelers twice a year and the Ravens twice a year. And we're going to see Joe Burrow on his butt 8 or 9 times a game in those contests. And I don't want to see that. And that's where, they've spent some money on the tackles. They spent some money on Karras. They spent money on Kappa, who is now gone. But they've got to have more than serviceable guards to do what they want to do with this offense.
And you still got some guys out there like a Scherf or like a Risner or Tevin Jenkins is still available. So there's definitely some names still available, but you've got to start somewhere. You have to bring someone in, because you can't just go out there with Cody Ford and Cordell Volson. You can't.
Right. And God bless Cody Ford for doing what he did last year. That's a guy that can play tackle, can play guard. To me, he's a guy, I don't want to say a bench guy. He's like a tool. It's like wherever you need him, you got to plug him in. If this guy's hurting, and he's been invaluable in that role. I am glad. I like that signing. But is he your starting everyday guard?
He's the utility player, right? Utility players aren't starters. They fill in the gaps when somebody needs a break.
Right. He's
not a starter, but he's a great depth piece.
Yeah, great depth piece. I mean, there's no question about that. But it's very interesting. But what a big day for Bengals fans. And I'm not. It was bigger than St. Patrick's Day by far. And I'm glad it happened. I thought it would happen. I'm still skeptical on the T thing for the reasons I said. I hope it all proves me wrong. I think he's a terrific player. I do. But I also don't think you can pour all your money into the passing game and ultimately win big for a long period of time in this league. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see.
We'll find out. It's not the first time that they've tried this route with Chad and TJ. Never paid off in a Super Bowl, but it was sure some exciting football to watch.
Well, I will say this too. Number one, you've got a franchise generational quarterback that you want comfortable, and you want him to know you're all in with him. So that was a big part of it. There's no doubt about it. If that had been another quarterback, who didn't have that leverage and not saying a whole lot, this may not have happened. But the other thing is you do have a franchise generational quarterback. And when he has weapons like that, look out. And what Mike Brown said is true. They got to keep up with us. That's going to be hard to do. I mean, they've got 3 of the best offensive players in the NFL playing for them right now, signed for 4 years.
Let's see if T can stay healthy, because I still don't believe that all of those games that he missed last season were solely because of injury.
Well, I hope he does stay healthy. I hope they all stay healthy, because it's going to be terrific and entertaining football. And, if they can hit on some draft picks and hit on some, under the radar signings that fill the gaps that they need to fill, and do it, at an average to above average level, they're going to be gold.
Well,
you just
we'll switch.
To think they can find those guys.
For sure. You can't keep missing. But we're going to switch gears here. The Cincinnati Bearcats men's basketball team finding themselves in Vegas here in a couple weeks, as they will be playing in the Crown. George, what are your thoughts?
Well, the Crown, really, I mean, did we really need this? And I know Fox wants to do it, and I guess it dumps money into the NIL for, the winning players or whatever. But, I mean, my God. And here's the hell of it. I'll watch it because UC's in it. But if UC wasn't in it, would I watch it? No. I'll be anxious to see how this goes. I'm torn. I'm glad they're playing more games. I'd watch them play any day, anywhere. But it's okay. I mean, it's that, the NIT, I don't know. They're okay. I like watching more games. But I'm not, am I thrilled about it? Hell no. But I will say this, Aaron, and I'm going to probably catch crap for this, but being a borderline NCAA team, and they weren't even quite borderline, they were just an edge below the bubble, as it turned out, and that's why you can't blow a 7-point or whatever it was lead at West Virginia coming down the stretch, or not quite get over the hump at home against Arizona when you make that great charge and you're right there, and it's and those 2 games right there, they're probably in the field. But there's a lot going on that isn't right, and it's good in this way to miss the tournament, because there's you have to fix stuff. It's not like, hey, we got in the tournament, we're all right, we're on the right track, we're doing no. Something's not right, and I'm glad that the message is loud and clear that this has to be fixed.
Keegan Nicholson, our own Keegan Nicholson, said from Wes Miller's radio show, Wes Miller said that he would be shocked if the majority of his roster does not play at the Crown in Las Vegas. Says there are extenuating circumstances about players potentially playing while being in the portal that still need to be addressed. I don't want to get pinned down here tonight, is what he said. So
he doesn't know. He hopes, the guys he wants back will be back and will, be fired up to play. And I don't know, if I'm a kid that age and, there's $300,000 on the line for the winning team, I'm playing.
Yeah, it'll be. I'm very curious to see who's on the roster that goes to Vegas, and to see who gets playing time, to see how this. I don't know that I'm necessarily curious as to how they play, because I'm with you. I don't know why we're doing this.
It probably doesn't matter who's going to be back.
But we'll see how it goes. In other Bearcats men's basketball news, though, looks that they may be hiring a GM. There's even a name attached to it in Corey Evans, an NBA scout for the Oklahoma City Thunder. What were your thoughts when you heard that, George?
Well, number one, it's necessary, unfortunately, but it is necessary. I mean, there's way too much movement. I mean, you got to have eyeballs on all these players during the season to know who fits what you do and all that. And that's, that's part of what UC got wrong last year. And I feel bad for Wes on this count, okay? he was banking on Jizzle shooting a little better this year than he did the year, right?
I'd hope so. Yeah.
Maybe Day too. Certainly, he thought Seamoss was going to pick up where he left off after he got healthy last season and was playing string music from 3 in the NIT. You expected Dan Skillings to take another step. So you got all these perimeter guys that you think are going to shoot it better. So you can bring in Dylan Mitchell, who isn't the greatest shooter and can't even make free throws like Rick Barry. And you can live with Aziz doing what he does if you got guys that can hit the shots you think they're going to hit. Well, they didn't do it. They all regressed in my mind, or well, not Day, but I would say Seamoss, Dan, and I don't know that Jizzle regressed, but he certainly didn't take the step I thought was going to happen. And so I feel bad for Wes in that regard because I think that's what he thought. Okay, we got plenty of scoring in the perimeter, and I don't know why Jizzle doesn't attack more and play through contact. He's a solid kid. I would think he can absorb that and get to the line more because the guy can shoot free throws too. And it's and I'm sure it's maddening to Wes. And I'm not defending the mess, but I see where he was coming from when people kill him on roster construction. And it's like, well, yeah, 3 to 4 of the guys I was banking on to take a natural step forward, some of them took a step backwards, and it hung them. It was a worst case scenario.
Yes.
Nuts?
Actually, yes, it was. No, you're not nuts at all. I mean, you don't. It's truly baffling to see not one, not two, but multiple players on this roster.
Right. Someone may. You generally think guys are going to take a little bit of a step forward, hopefully even a big step forward. And I did. I watched these guys play last year. I thought, holy crap, that kid's a freshman. He's going to be phenomenal next year. It didn't happen. And I don't know if maybe that's his fault. I don't know. I don't know where the developmental status of this program is. But I know this, traditionally, and it's a different world, but he's had his hands on these guys. Traditionally, Bearcat basketball has guys progress. You have guys who are Kenyon Martin, who didn't do anything as a freshman except jump out of the gym and made great impressions with block shots. But even his junior to senior year was a hell of a leap. Eric Hicks, Jason Maxiel. I can go through a million of them. I can go through some with Mick. That's not Bearcat basketball is getting better every year, and that's not happening.
Well, I like to hear you on your Bearcat basketball soapbox, George. That's my favorite place for you to be.
Hey, don't listen to me. I'm an old guy. I didn't know what the
hell. Bearcat baseball had a rough weekend, so I'm not gonna shine a light on that too much. Hopefully, they can figure some things out here.
Yeah, that hurt.
Arizona proved to be tough. I think the final score of the entire weekend was 33-6. So they got to figure some things out. Didn't work real well, whatever they were doing in Arizona.
ESPN Plus was not fun viewing this weekend.
Outside of that, FC Cincinnati, what are they doing, George?
Lost to Charlotte Saturday. Last Tuesday when we were talking, right after they played that match in Mexico in the Champions Cup, they got eliminated from that. So not a lot of good, but it's early.
Not a lot of goals in the way that this roster has been constructed.
No, exactly.
People are very upset about the lack of scoring.
Yes, that and that's somewhat surprising given the talent they have and the positions they have. But I still I think they'll be there. That it's so early. And I also, everybody else had to do this. But when you're playing these games and these other tournaments and you're trying to play MLS, there's just a lot going on. I hope they can settle down and concentrate. I'm not. Am I concerned? Yeah, a little, but I'm not. I'm not giving up any hope by any stretch. In fact, I hope this is a turnaround from last year, but they hit their stride in the second half.
Is Pat Noonan's seat getting hot?
No. If it is, I would be surprised.
Okay.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
I just know how the season. I just know how the season.
August.
I just know how the season ended last year and how it's starting thus far.
Yeah, you're going to ask me in August, and there may be a different answer. And you know what? Thankfully, there are organizations where there are standards where seats get hot in a hurry.
Outside of that, anything going on in high school basketball, George?
Tonight. Well, Chad's boys lost to a very good Cooper team, so Cooper's going to the Sweet 16 in Kentucky, and I believe the only local Northern Kentucky team that's going to be playing down in Lexington in that Kentucky Sweet 16. Ohio boys, Aiken's playing for the state championship in Division III against Louisville on Friday, I believe, and that's the only Ohio local school going. And Ohio girls, Winton Woods won state title in Division II. Princeton lost a tough game in Division I in the state championship. However, D. Alexander,
she did.
UC commit, Division III, Purcell Marion, 4 straight.
That's
How about that?
That's what a career.
You know what? That's going to be fun to watch next year and see how that team is. I will definitely be checking that out, and I hope a lot of people are. Wouldn't that be fun if like that became a thing?
What's a program at UC winning? Yeah,
yes,
that would be fun.
Thank you. Yes, that would
it's been a little while. So,
well, I'll tell you what. I think the fans are certainly starving for it because they had like 2,000 or more at that baseball game with Miami.
Yep.
I knew several people who went. I couldn't go. It was last Tuesday when we were on, I think. But they said it was a ball. It was a ball. So, and they do all those things like the minor league games do. It's entertaining. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope the fans keep coming out.
I agree. Well, that's going to wrap it up here for George and I. Thanks again to Mark Sheldon for joining us from CincinnatiReds.com. We certainly appreciate that. MLB.com. Check out Remington Tavern. They can be found at 8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have their daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. Check them out on Instagram at RemyTavCincy or follow them on Facebook. You can also get your Cincy Light there. And we thank Cincy Light for sponsoring our studios. With that, we will be back here next Tuesday at 9 o'clock p.m. to discuss all of your Cincinnati sports.
Thank you, Aaron.